Bonjour and good afternoon. Welcome to WASA Distance Education Center and PLAR History. So we're into the last week of February, if you could believe that. So it is week 4, and today is Tuesday, February 27th. So after this week, we are into March, and we have a March break coming up. You can still contact your local DEC. So we have Michelle and Candace if you want to register for the 2023-24 school year. We also have an electronic application form if you don't have the hard copy. This is what it looks like when you sign up using the electronic form. Remember, you're signing up using the form. It doesn't mean that you're signing up for an online course. Okay, just want to make that clear. So the form is, you can go to the link. It says WASA sign up. Once you get there, it will take you to the Power Form signer offer information. What you have to do there is just type your name. Make sure you have a working email, and then you can fill in and sign the WASA application form. So those are the two things that you need, just your full name and your email. Once you input that into the Power Form signer information, then you can begin signing, which means that you can fill out the necessary information you need to sign up for a course. So it's very simple. A reminder to all students, at the end of Term 2A, we will have 2 more student draws, one for students who earned a credit, and for those students, your prize is a Dell laptop, and one for students who submit work, which we are drawing for an iPad mini. So remember, the more lessons you submit, the more entries you will have for entering into the draw. And students working on more than one course will have their names entered for each subject that they submit work for. So if you are taking ENG 4C and you're taking math, you have double the chances for having your name or your name put into the draw. To participate live, you can still call the radio, the 1-800-465-7144 or 807-737-4017. As always, you can still go to the Zoom link. You can also tune in, so just audio only, 91.9 FM or Bell Express View 972. You can also watch uploaded classes on YouTube for for all PLAR. So if you want to watch the PLAR Math and English, go to B. Osman WASA. If you want to watch the PLAR History, Geography, and Science, go to J. Mercer WASA. To make it simpler for viewing the classes, we have the PLAR uploaded through a playlist. So students who are ahead of PLAR History, you may watch it on PLAR History 1A 2023 playlist. If you're working on the PLAR Geography, you can watch it on the 1A 2023. Students working on their science can watch the 1B 2023-24. So the current classes that I'm uploading now is under PLAR History 2A 2024. So lots of choices if you need extra help with working on your lessons. And if you don't have Wi-Fi or internet, that's not a problem. You can ask for a USB. We will upload the classes for you on a flash drive, and you will just need a USB port to insert your flash drive. And you can view these on your laptop, television, Xbox, or PlayStation. So once you connect it, you can check. Say, for example, you're having problems with key questions 13 and 14. So you simply go to the class that says PLAR History Lesson 1, key questions 12 to 18. That means that key questions 13 and 14 are also within that class. Okay, and that just makes it easier for you to search for the key questions that you might be having problems with. Okay, once you're ready to submit your work for marking, lots of ways to do that too. You can scan your work, you can use your iPhone Notes app, or you can email or send it through us through Messenger. Two ways to send it on Messenger. You can scan it, so scan your pages. Okay, the advantage of scanning it does not give you a background once you scan it. So you can see on the left hand side here, this is a scanned image of your key questions, and then on the right one, or the right hand side, that's a picture. So notice on the picture you can see the background. So that's that looks like a table. So if you scan it, then you don't have to worry about sending the background as well. And that's good for us too, because when we print it, we won't need to worry about the background as well. But if it's easier for you to send it through a picture, then send it that way. Do what's easiest for you. You can also use Google Classroom if you want to send your work. Remember, you can go to the Google Classroom for PLAR History, Geography, Science, as well as the PLAR Math and English. Don't forget, when you're submitting work through Google Classroom, you have to turn it in. If you're not sure if you've turned it in or not, just use the share feature. That means it will automatically send me an email to let me know that you've shared a document with me. So here's your course calendar for PLAR History Geography. We're getting near, so again, this is week 4. So after week 5, then we will start with geography. So if you don't need the geography portion, then you're done your PLAR history, and you should contact me if I tell you already that you are eligible to write the culminating, then make sure you contact me if you're having problems receiving the culminating activity, either from email, or if you don't have a DEC, for example, then I will have to send it to you somehow. So here we are. We finished as far as key question 25 from our last class. So that's lesson 2, key question 25. So hopefully today we will get the rest of lesson 2. If not, we will continue on Thursday. Remember, the culminating activity, again, either myself or the DEC will give you the culminating activity to complete. You will not receive your equivalent credit if you do not submit the culminating activity. In order to pass it, you need 50% and over, okay, in order to pass it. Sorry, it should say 50% or over. And there are some students who have been sent the culminating activity. You need to complete and return those to me, please, so that you can get your equivalent credit. From our last class, we did Canada in 1939. So that was on page 4 of lesson 2. And then we did World War II on page 5, the Canadian War Effort on page 6. We looked at how the Japanese Canadians were treated on page 7, and we looked at Spotlight of Joy Kogawa on page 8. So for today's class, we will look at After the War on page 12, NATO and NORAD. We'll look at what these two acronyms mean. Also Indigenous Peoples and the White Paper on page 13. First Nations Historical Timeline, page 14. And what's going on with Canada between 1960 to 1980. Specifically Quebec on page 15. And then the Quiet Revolution on page 15 as well. Learning goals. For lesson 2, I can describe Canada's role during the Second World War. I can identify significant events for Indigenous peoples during the mid-20th century, and I can explain the historical importance of Quebec's Quiet Revolution. So keep those things in mind as you're going through the lesson. So what was Canada's role ending the war? During the war, we had, again, this is on page 5. Hitler and the Germans tried to eliminate all Jews. So this was known as the Holocaust. So remember when Adolf Hitler became the German Chancellor in 1933, he decided to abandon, or he didn't care for the Treaty of Versailles, so he wanted to build the German empire again, or army again. Hitler was the leader of the Nazi Party in Germany and began to persecute anyone who was not of direct German descent, especially the Jews. Nazis believed in a racial hierarchy and believed in the existence of an Aryan master race that was superior to all races. He also decided that only people that should be allowed to live freely were the Germans, or people with blonde hair and blue eyes. When the war broke out in September 1939, about 250,000 Jews fled Germany because of the violence and discrimination. Many people, especially people of the Jewish faith, were captured. They were interned in camps. They had their property confiscated. They were either killed or forced to work for their life. Okay, in total, 6 million Jews were murdered during the Holocaust. The Jews were not the only victims of Nazism. It was estimated that as many as 15 million civilians were killed by this murderous and racist regime, including millions of Slavs and Asiatics, 200,000 Gypsies, and members of various other groups. So you have thousands of people, including Germans of African descent. They were forcibly sterilized. The Nazis, however, failed in this aim because they ran out of time, but they pursued it fanatically until their defeat in 1945. The Holocaust led to widespread public awareness of genocide and to modern efforts to prevent it, such as the 1948 UN Convention on Genocide. Okay, so we have a picture here of a Holocaust victim. He was rescued outside of Auschwitz by Soviet troops in January of 1945. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see Holocaust deaths. And this is a pie chart. It shows you that there was Soviet prisoners of war, 20%, politicals, 10%, Polish Jews, 24%, including Soviet Jews and ethnic Poles, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. So this is all in that chart. These were the people that were all affected. As for Canada, well, Canadians fought in many important battles during the Second World War, especially in Italy and Normandy. So what did Canada do? Well, they sent many infantry and airplanes to fight in the battles. Their air force became known as the Royal Canadian Air Force, or RCAF. Canada and the United States and their allies, they struck the opposition by sending many troops to Europe on D-Day. and that was on June 6, 1944. What this did was it pushed back the German forces, and then in the months to come, the Allied forces continued to succeed in their battles against Germany. In 1945, Hitler, seeing that he was defeated, or he sensed defeat was at hand, he committed suicide. And as the Allied forces made their way through Europe, they liberated the Jewish people in the camps and the residents of the countries that had been invaded by Germany. So we have a couple of pictures here. This is, again, World War II, a tribute to the RCAF. That's some of the pilots that flew these planes. And here's a picture of Normandy invasion, D-Day, June 6, 1944. Okay, that was from the Britannica website. In May of 1945, we have the Germans surrendering. Now, the other major threat was Japan. But Japan was devastated when on August 6, 1945, the United States dropped a nuclear atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this killed tens of thousands instantly. Japan surrendered in September of 1945. So you can see here on the right, that's an aerial photo. That was taken August 6, 1945. So it says here, United States took a drastic action against Japan. So they dropped a nuclear bomb on the city of Hiroshima. Then 3 days later, they followed with dropping the bomb at Nagasaki. And the devastation left Japan forcing a surrender less than a month later. So September 2nd, 1945, officials from both sides stood on the deck of the USS Missouri, and they finalized Japan's surrender and the end of World War II. Okay, so that's when the war officially ended. So what happened after the war? So we're looking at 1945 to 1960. So this is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So Canadians were horrified when they saw what happened in Europe, especially to the Jews. So Canadians focused their energies on creating laws that would protect human rights in Canada. They wanted to make sure that a Holocaust could never happen here. So we had a new Bill of Rights that was passed in 1958, which later became the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in 1982. So if you look on page 12, under the heading After the War, it outlines the Bill of Rights that was created and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So it gives people the right to vote, the right to election. It gives people the right to move around the country. It gives people the right to life, liberty, and feeling safe. The right not to be arrested without reason, and the right to a fair trial. So people would not be discriminated against, and people had the right to use either French or English officials. So you can see a copy on the bottom of the screen or the slide. On the left-hand side is the Canadian Bill of Rights, and then on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, it shows the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's what it looks like. Okay, following the end of the Second World War, we had Great Britain, United States, China, and the United Soviet Socialist Republics they got together what was called the League of Nations. So it was created because, so the League of Nations, remember after World War I, they had 48 countries that joined that. Canada was a founding member, and what was the goal of the League of Nations was to promote international cooperation and to achieve international peace and security. Basically, what they wanted to do is to prevent war. Of course, we know that didn't happen. So we had Great Britain, the United States, China, and USSR, or United Soviet Socialist Republics. At the end of World War II, they formed what was called the United Nations. Again, their main goal was to prevent war. So that's on page 12. So what was, so the main function was to prevent war. They also wanted to improve the quality of life in all nations and work for the human rights of all people. Canada helped convince the United States of the importance of the United Nations. Canada was invited to be a founding member of the United Nations and presently sits on the General Assembly and has been elected several times to the Security Council. So Canada's main support of the United Nations has been in the field of peacekeeping. So here's a map to show you. There are 193 member states of the United Nations. Oops. Just add this on here. Okay, up next. So turning to page 13. What we see happening after United Nations was the start of the Cold War in 1947. Okay, this was the belief that all governments would become either communist or capitalist. The Western Allies feared that the Soviet Union would use force to expand its influence, especially concerned that Soviet agents had obtained information on making the bomb after the war. Okay, so that was the United States and its allies against the Soviet Union and its allies. It was a long period of cold relations, proxy wars, and tension, meaning there was no direct fighting. When it was in 1945 until the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, it happened worldwide. It happened worldwide, but major areas of importance included Europe, the Middle East, Central America, and Asia. And the reason for it was that the US and USSR disagreed in terms of their basic beliefs. So the Cold War began. It was a rivalry between the United States and the USSR against democracy and the free enterprise system versus communism and command of the economic system. So two words or two terms. One is capitalism and communism. So capitalism means an economic system in which production of goods or services are privately owned and they're operated for profit. Communism, on the other hand, is a political and economic system in which you have the government controlling all business. This meant that individual people cannot own property or industries, and in theory, people of all social classes are treated equally. By 1945, there were two Chinese governments. We had the nationalist government of Chiang Kai-shek. He was based in southern and central China. He was supported by the United States, and the communist government of Mao Zedong in northern China, and he was supported by Soviet Union. Okay, on page 13, we have NATO and NORAD. So NATO first is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It is an international organization and was developed in 1949. It basically says that if the United States or any of the European countries that are a part of the treaty are attacked, the others will come to their aid. So basically, you could see the NATO countries, so those are in yellow. USSR, that country is in green. Satellite countries, that means they belong to other countries, like, so you have USSR satellite countries, you have under USSR, and then the other countries are in gray. That means they're not part of the NATO countries or USSR. The second one is the North American Aerospace Defense Command, or NORAD. This is a joint United States and Canada organization founded on May 12, 1958. What it does is that it monitors man-made objects in space, and then it provides a warning against plane and missile attacks from the Soviet Union. So the Soviets developed their own missiles after the Second World War, and North America became concerned over this. So you can see here you have a picture on the left. In September 1957, two nations agreed to create the North American Air Defense Command, headquartered in Colorado Springs, as a binational command centralizing operational control of continental air defenses against the threat of Soviet bombers. On May 12, 1958, the agreement between the Canadian and U.S. governments that established NORAD was formalized. The agreement included 11 principles governing the organization and operation of NORAD, and called for a renewal of the agreement in 10 years. Okay, and that's the end of lesson 2. So we will look at key questions. Let me just get this up here. Sorry, not the end of lesson 2, I mean the end of World War II. So our key question next is key question 25. What was the Holocaust? So remember, if you're not writing on the spaces that I provided for you, make sure that you are at least writing the key question number. You do not need to rewrite the question itself, but you do need to write your response in a complete sentence. So you can write something like the Holocaust. So start off with that, so you know when you're doing your review which question you were answering. So the Holocaust was, and then write your answer. This one, in 2 or 3 sentences, describe the events in 1944 and 1945 that brought about the end of the Second World War. So what I want to see here is that you would start off in 1944 and you end at 1945 when the war is over. So if you want to you could start off, you might start off with Canada and the US. So US sent troops. Then you can write down the date. So in 1944, specifically, you can write the month. So June let's take out 1944 and put June 1944. Take out in, let's put on June 1944, and then what happened after that? They pushed the German troops back, and then you would end it off with August 1945. So you would write more sentences there. So August 1945, that's when U.S. dropped the nuclear bomb. On Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And then we have September 1945, where we have Japan surrendering and that ended World War II. Okay, key question 27. It says, why did Canada feel it was necessary to create the Bill of Rights and the Charter of Rights and Freedom? So that's the first part. First, why did they think that it was necessary? So start off with your answer as Canada felt it was necessary. So write down the reason why they thought that, hey, we should have the Bill of Rights and Charter of Rights and Freedoms. What was the reason for that? And then the second part of the question says, outline what these laws were designed to force. So these laws were designed so I'll give you one. We have where it designed and you can list them, so to give so it gives people the right to vote. Oops. So they were designed to something wonky is going on with the smart board. Okay, designed. Okay, I'll just write it here. Okay, gives people let me just move that down. Okay, gives people the right to vote. So you would have to outline all the laws there. So it gives people the right to vote, and you would continue. So if you need more space, go ahead and write it on another sheet of paper. All right, key question 28. What is the main function of the United Nations? So that one's pretty straightforward. You're just telling me what was it mainly, or what is its main purpose, so the main function of the UN. And then key question 29, what does NATO stand for? So NATO is an acronym. That means each letter represents a word. So NATO stands for, now this one is a two-part question. So the first part, you're telling me what it stands for, ... and what is its purpose. So its purpose, meaning NATO, and you tell me what its purpose is. Its purpose is ... Okay, let's continue. We have two more key questions left to do, but we are going to look at the last section of lesson 2. And the last section of lesson 2 is regarding indigenous peoples and the white paper. So back in 1969, we have Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau. So if you know our current minister, Justin Trudeau, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, that's his dad. He was also with the Minister of Indian Affairs, Jean Chrétien. What they did was they proposed a policy to abolish, that means to get rid of, all previous laws regarding indigenous peoples in Canada. And this included the Indian Act and treaties. So this was a proposal known as the White Paper. So the White Paper also wanted to eliminate status and put First Nations communities under the control of the provinces. The policy was intended to abolish the Indian Act. Oops. Don't know why that's happening with the board here. Okay. Okay, so they wanted to get rid of the Indian Act, get rid of the treaties, and they also wanted to assimilate all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So there's the people that were involved in this. As I said, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, the Indian Affairs Minister Jean Chrétien. So he believed that Aboriginal people should be treated like all other citizens and abolish all special rights they have on reserves, for example, not paying income tax. He also encourages, so the White Paper encourages Aboriginals to leave reserves and get jobs in cities. Assimilation as a solution to social problems. So the response from First Nation communities that the White Paper is an attack on the right to maintain a unique identity, and they considered it as cultural genocide. So let's see what happens next. So yes, they opposed this policy. So First Nations leaders, organizations, they believed that the federal government was doing just that. They were trying to avoid its treaty obligations and responsibilities. In their response, many marches, demonstrations, rallies, they were held to protest the government's policies. This movement became known as the Red Power Movement. We had Harold Cardinal, he was a Cree leader. He released a book called The Unjust Society, and it heavily criticized the White Paper. Became a bestseller in Canada, and it played a key part in forcing the government to back down on its proposals. So it was never passed. So the backlash to the 1969 White Paper was monumental, leading not only to its withdrawal in 1970, but a wave of activism, academic work, and court decisions over the next 5 decades. So you can see here, there's a picture here of Premier of Alberta, Harry Strom. You can see a picture of Harold Cardinal and Jean Chrétien, who was at the time the Minister of Indian Affairs. This was taken December 18, 1970. So let's look at the First Nations historical timeline. So you could see here, the following timeline shows you some of the significant events for Indigenous peoples in Canada, beginning from 1939. So on the left-hand side, you can see the date. The events are on the right. 1939 to 45, over 3,000 Aboriginal soldiers and nurses served during World War II. 1949, First Nations people in British Columbia were permitted to vote in provincial elections. In 69, so I'm skipping some dates here, the federal government, so this is what we were just talking about under Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau and Minister of Indian Affairs Jean Chrétien. They tried to issue the white paper. Also in 1969, the defeat of the white paper stirs a surge in Aboriginal art and literature. In 1972, Indian Control of Indian Education Policy document is written by National Indian Brotherhood, advocating parental responsibility and local control over First Nations education. Now, this policy was accepted by the federal government a year after, or a year later. 1975, the World Council of Indigenous People was founded at a conference in Port Alberni, BC. Between the 1960s and 80s, over 20,000 First Nation children were taken from their families and placed in foster homes, and they were put up for adoption by white families. These children were also frequently placed in residential schools. This government policy and practices by child welfare agencies were known as the 60s scoop. So you can see a picture on the bottom of the slide there. It was attempted to address the lack of Aboriginal parental skills by forcibly removing thousands of Aboriginal children from their parents. The children were made wards of a poorly monitored child welfare system, and most of them were placed into non-Aboriginal foster homes. Okay, so let's look at key questions 30 and 31. So key question 30, what was the white paper and what did it propose? So first you want to tell me what the white paper is. So if you're not sure on where to find the answers, again, use the heading in your lesson. So if you're looking for the answer for this question, look on page 13. There's a heading that says Indigenous Peoples and the white paper. Okay, so the white paper, tell me what that means. What did it propose? What did it want to accomplish? So you would simply write it proposed and then tell me what it is. So if you want to receive full marks for the key questions, make sure that you have both parts of the question answered. Key question 31. So why did First Nations people object to the white paper? Why did they not want to have it? So first, First Nations people objected. That means they didn't want it. Two, okay, the white paper and tell me the reason. So because okay, so next up is Canada 1960 to 1980. So this is the next, or the last section. So we're looking at Quebec in specifically. So from the earliest days, and we talked about this of Canadian history, there was some tension between French-speaking and English-speaking Canadians. They have often disagreed about how Canada should be run and what it means to be a Canadian economy. So many Quebecois felt the best solution for Quebec would be to separate from Canada, and they wanted to form their own nation. Their political views were different. Remember, they did not agree on the conscription crisis, both in World War I and World War II. Okay, and they wanted to separate from the rest of Canada. They wanted to be their own nation. You can see a picture here of the Canadian map, or Canada's map. Notice where Quebec, it shows they want to be their own country or nation. And then you have a poster that encourages Quebec to be separated from Canada. So this is when the Quiet Revolution began, and we had Jean Lesage. He won the Quebec election in 1960. He was the leader of the Quebec Liberal Party. His slogan was Maîtres chez nous, which meant masters of our own house. Again, he wanted independence. It was dubbed as quiet, so the reason quiet is an exclamation, sorry, not exclamation, in quotation marks, is because it achieved, he wanted to achieve this without force. That means not using guns or violence. He wanted to achieve this using magazines, newspaper articles, changes in political legislation. Basically, he just wanted to improve the lives of Quebecois citizens, and he wanted to take the power from English minority to French majority. Okay, on the bottom of the screen, you can see the Union Nationale. This is Maurice Duplessis. He blamed the existence of the Depression on the fact that many Quebec's industries were owned by Americans and English-speaking Canadians. He formed the Union Nationale so that Quebecers would have more control over their economy. The Union Nationale won the Quebec election in 1936 and remained a force in Quebec politics for the next 22 years. So why did Quebec want their independence? Well, many French Canadians felt that their language and culture might disappear. French language and culture is overwhelmed by English. They were tired of feeling like second-class citizens in their own country, and most started to think that Canada should secede, meaning to be independent, from Canada. So we have separatists. They want Quebec to separate from Canada. Okay, so we're going to stop here. So I want you to continue reading The Quiet Revolution. Look up the policies of the Quiet Revolution so that we can finish on Thursday. We will do key questions 32 and 33, and that would end lesson 2. Okay, thank you for joining me. Miigwech.